Hey, welcome to Road to Forever. It's Terry, and in this video there are two things which I want to do. The first is to share some cabbage juice for Ulcers reviews, and also to just talk about cabbage juice and ulcers in general. And so if you've seen any of my other videos on my stomach ulcer healing, you will know that I healed my stomach ulcer naturally, and that cabbage juice was one of the things that was instrumental in healing my stomach ulcers. And so before I just started, using cabbage juice, I made sure that I went and I read, what the science said about cabbage juice. And so there is an old research paper from, the 1940s, I think about 1949, that talked about cabbage juice and how it caused rapid healing in patients who were dealing with stomach ulcers. And I'll make sure that I'll put that article on the screen. I'll also link it down in the description box below. And so, I read about that. I also knew about all the different compounds that are in cabbage, obviously because I have a background in nutrition. And so those things were all part of what helped me to make the decision about incorporating cabbage juice into my natural healing for my stomach ulcer. Because after I went to the doctor and found out, that stomach ulcers was something that I had related to, obviously, my overuse of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medications, then I knew that I wanted to heal my ulcer naturally. So, I didn't want antibiotics. I didn't want to take any of these over-the-counter medications. And I knew that, natural healing was the way to go for me. I'm not saying that's what you should do. I'm just sharing what worked for me. And so cabbage juice was instrumental in that. Cabbage juice wasn't the only thing that I used. Obviously, there were several different steps and strategies that I used to heal my ulcer naturally, and I've shared some of those in my stomach ulcer playlist, which I'll link below for you as well. And I've also, detailed that in my stomach ulcer ebook, which I'll make sure to link in the description down below for you as well. So one of the things that I noticed after, my stomach ulcer video where I shared about how I healed my stomach ulcer fast was I had lots of questions about, cabbage juice and my healing process. And so one of the things I'm going to do is to make sure that I address those questions. These questions also came up in the video that I made about how to make cabbage juice for stomach ulcers without a juicer. And so I'll make sure to link that down below. So if you don't have a juicer and cabbage juice is something you're thinking about incorporating in your diet, then you don't have to, feel pressure to go out and buy a juicer, because you can make cabbage juice without using a juicer at all. So I definitely want to make sure I link that down below for you as well. But one of the first questions that I often had was, how fast did I get release after using cabbage juice? And so for me, within that first 5 days, I felt better using the cabbage juice. And like I said, cabbage juice wasn't the only thing, right? I followed an anti-inflammatory diet. I used DGL. I had bone broth. I had an entire video on what I think the best bone broth is on the market, which I'll also link below for you as well. And I'll put a link to the website if you're interested in using that bone broth as well. But for me, right away, there was a difference. In that first week, my stomach felt so much better. The first time I used the cabbage juice, obviously the taste was very harsh. It wasn't something that I was used to. It's not the best tasting, but again, I was in pain and this worked for me. So I definitely, will sing its praises, because I know that it had a positive effect on my healing. So, definitely a thumbs up for the cabbage juice from my own perspective. So within that first day when I used it, my stomach felt a little bit better. I didn't have that burning sensation. And by the end of the week, literally, all that burning sensation and discomfort that I had disappeared. And also other individuals who have watched my stomach ulcer videos, one of the comments that they made was that in 3 days after them making the cabbage juice, they also felt relief. Again, before you make any changes to your diet, go to your healthcare provider, make sure that they clear you to make these different changes. I'm not saying you need to do these things. I'm sharing what worked for me and also some of the individuals who have commented on my video. So this is not for me to diagnose you or to tell you what you should do. It's just sharing my experiences of what worked in terms of healing my ulcer. So yeah, within that first week, like I said, I definitely had relief, from using the cabbage juice. Another question that I often get related to cabbage juice is, how much should you drink? And so again, that's going to vary. Like I said, it has a very strong taste. So that really depends on whether or not you're okay with something that has that strong taste and smell. You might want to have some water ready to go after you drink the cabbage juice, just to wash it down and to get that taste out your mouth. But it varied. So sometimes it would be 4 ounces, sometimes it would be 8, sometimes it would be 16. But for the most part, I generally had 8 ounces of the cabbage juice. And I would do that in the morning on an empty stomach. And I'm making that clear because people always ask me too, what's the best time to drink your cabbage juice? For me, like I said, I did that in the morning on an empty stomach. And sometimes I would have it later in the day. I also would make sure that it was on an empty stomach. I hadn't just eaten. So maybe before I had lunch, again, I would have maybe another 4 ounces, but that really varies. But in the morning, I would definitely try to have 8 ounces on an empty stomach before I had any of my meals. And if you're interested in what I ate during my stomach ulcer healing, I have videos on the foods I avoided, as well as my stomach ulcer diet menu, which I'll make sure to link in the description for you as well. Now, the next question I often get related to cabbage juice is, can I add other fruits or vegetables to make it taste better? So for me, I drank it plain. I didn't add any other fruits or vegetables. However, later on, once I felt like my ulcer healed, I did add fruits to it just to change the flavor. So you could add, green apples, celery, cucumbers, or even carrots. And so again, that will change the flavor. And so that was something that I incorporated after, 3 weeks, when I felt like, my stomach was back to normal and it wasn't hurting like it was, and I didn't have any more of those stomach ulcer symptoms. But while I was going through the, initial healing process, I just had my cabbage juice plain with nothing added. But, it doesn't mean that you can't add green apple to change the taste and the flavor and still get healing from it. So just wanted to make that clear. In terms of how long it will take for your stomach ulcer to heal, that really varies from person to person. It also depends on whether or not you have, gastritis, or you do have a stomach ulcer that's caused by your use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or caused by the H. pylori bacteria. And so that really depends. People often ask as well, about back pain with their stomach ulcer. So that's something you also have to follow up with your doctor about, because maybe it's pancreatitis. It could be something related to your gallbladder or your bile ducts. Even though maybe, for you, referred pain, which, feels like back pain, is something that happens when you have your ulcer. So those are some things that you're definitely going to want to follow up with your healthcare provider about for sure. Now, let's take a look. I'm just going to share some of the reviews from individuals who have watched these videos or have used my stomach ulcer ebook about, how did cabbage juice work for them, especially in terms of healing their ulcer. So let's check that out right now. All right, guys, so as you can see, it varies from person to person, and cabbage juice gets a thumbs up as something that is helpful with your stomach ulcers. If you enjoyed this video, I ask that you give it a thumbs up, that you share it with your friends, and that you subscribe for more awesome content just like this. But before you leave, I want to remind you, you're only one prayer away. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Take care.